This is going to be a lecture on drama. Before we discuss 6 characters in search of an author, we need first to, of course, familiarize ourselves or some kind of a review of the different elements of drama. And we're discussing it against poetics. It's something that Aristotle, the philosopher Aristotle, wrote about, and it discusses what drama should be made of, and therefore it sets the standards for in discussing drama. So because of that, this is going to be a discussion on tragedy. Because just to give you an idea, the most known kind of genre of drama is tragedy. So this is tragedy according to Aristotle. This is Aristotle, okay? And you have here, later on, I'll be telling you about the elements and how it was applied in the drama Antigone, or in the, what we call a Theban Trilogy. And all these other movies here are considered to be, of course, based on classic dramas. These are all tragedies. So, before we go directly to the elements, let me first tell you a short story. Actually, this is not a short story because it's a trilogy. The Theban Trilogy is considered by Aristotle to be the best example of ancient Greek drama. The Theban Trilogy is written by the playwright Sophocles. Okay? And since it is trilogy, it is made up of 3 dramas. The first one is Oedipus the King, also known as the Oedipus Rex, Oedipus at Colonus, and the last one is Antigone. Just some fun facts, that based on this trilogy, a psychoanalysis term is coined called the Oedipus complex. Oedipus complex is when a young boy is more attached to his mother. That's what we call Oedipus complex. We have the opposite of that, which is based on another ancient Greek drama called the Electra complex, where the young girl is more attached to her father. But anyway, that's just, some fun facts for you guys. And another one is that Antigone, the third in the trilogy, actually was the first one to be written by Sophocles, but chronologically it happened last. So you can just imagine how brilliant it was for Sophocles to ever do that. Nauna pa to sa Star Wars and other movies that employ the prequel technique instead of a sequel. They did the prequel thing. Okay, moving on. So let me just tell you a story. Okay, I'm telling you 3 sets of stories here, so you better listen up. So in Oedipus the King, it happened in the kingdom of Thebes. And the kingdom was ruled by King Laius and Queen Jocasta. And they could not have a child. And finally, when they were able to conceive a child, the prophet Tiresias had a prophecy. And he had to warn the king and queen, saying that, you know what, your child is going to kill his father and he's going to marry his mother. So, because of that, prophecy, they were bothered, and therefore they decided to have the child killed. Okay, they decided to have the child killed. But just like what happened in Snow White, when Snow White was ordered by the evil queen to be killed, the soldier or whoever it was that the queen ordered to kill Snow White had, pitied the young girl. And that's also what happened to the fate of this child. The guy who was supposed to kill him took pity on him, and therefore he just sent him away, far, far away. And so, knowing that the child was already dead, the king and queen lived their lives, their normal lives. So, what happened there? In a far, far away land, a young boy was growing up to be a very fine man. And when he was old enough, they had the practice of visiting the Oracle of Delphi. And when he visited, the name of this boy is Oedipus. When Oedipus visited the oracle told him of his fate. And it said, "You know what, young boy? Someday you're going to kill your father and you're going to marry your mother." Because he was somewhat disgusted by that prophecy, he decided to run away so he could not fulfill the prophecy, okay, his fate, thinking that it was his biological mother and father who raised him. He didn't want to kill the father, and he didn't want to, of course, marry his mother, so he went away. He went far, far away until he met a man at a crossroad, at a boundary, near a boundary to the new kingdom. And the man refused to let him enter the kingdom. But because he was so eager to enter and to go far from where he's been, they fought, and he eventually killed the man. Now he came because he killed that man. He came upon this kingdom, which was unfortunately, plagued by a sphinx. This is not just a simple sphinx. This is a riddling sphinx. And what is so disturbing about it is that the sphinx, he gives out riddles, and when people could not give him the right answer, he would eat these people. And so it's really a plague. And the name of the king then was Creon. And he was so desperate that he told everyone, okay, whoever solves this puzzle, I will have to give up my throne. That person, assuming that it was a guy, that person will be the king, and I will let him marry my sister, the queen. Okay? So, because Oedipus was so brilliant, he was able to solve that riddle. And Creon, being true to himself, let him marry the queen, and so he became a king. So, Oedipus plus wife equals 4 children. You have here the oldest sons. They were twins. Now that itself already has a conflict, because who's next in line for the throne is the oldest boy. And here you have a problem, because what you have here is a twin. These are twins, Eteocles and Polynices. And of course, the 2 girls, Antigone, Ismene is the third one, and Antigone. Antigone is the youngest. Okay? Now, there came upon a time when the kingdom again encountered another crisis. And being the king, Oedipus had to find a way on how to solve that. And they had a practice of asking their advisors. If they could not find any answer from their advisors, they would go to the prophet Tiresias. Tiresias is a blind prophet. And Tiresias said, the kingdom will over and over again come upon a crisis until the murder of the king is solved. And the king that he was talking about was the king before Creon. Okay? Because the king was murdered and nobody could ever solve his murder. And because the current king, Oedipus, wanted to save his kingdom from further and from, more crisis in the future, he declared he it's as if he sent out an investigation team to find out what really happened to the king. Only to find out, of course, that the king was the guy that he killed at the crossroad. Remember that guy who wouldn't let him in the kingdom? When he went away from his home, he was the one, Oedipus was the one who murdered that guy, who happened to be the king, and who happened to be his father. And his wife is the sister of Creon. Her name is Jocasta. And she was the wife of the guy, of the king, that Oedipus murdered at the crossroads. And therefore, they all realized that the prophecy, the initial prophecy of Tiresias actually came true. So what happened to them? At the end of the first part of the trilogy, Jocasta took her own life. This is a tragedy, remember. So do not be surprised if people keep on dying. If there are lots and lots of people who die. Jocasta took her own life. Oedipus blinded himself and he exiled himself to Colonus. That's where the second part of the trilogy, Oedipus at Colonus, took part. It basically tells us how Oedipus lived his life as a normal human being, as a normal citizen, and how his younger daughter, Antigone, took care of him. Because Antigone was his favorite child. Because she was spirited, she was strong-willed. Okay? And Creon, once again, became the king. Because there's no king. The twins are still young to be the king, and therefore he again became like an interim king. So, what happened now in Antigone is this. So we skip Oedipus at Colonus because, as I've told you, it basically tells us what happened to Oedipus until he died. So, in Antigone, this is the last part, and remember, this was the first written by Sophocles. The twins, Eteocles and Polynices, were old enough to be kings. So, their uncle, Creon, said, okay, boys, you're old enough. Let's solve this, problem, because you're twins and there's supposed to be just one king. So what they agreed that they'll have to take turns. They'll have to have a year, and then after that he'll have to step down. The other will have to be the king, and then that will, continue until somebody dies. So after a year, for the first year, they agreed that Eteocles be the king. Now, of course, my question is, if you already are in that highest power, you've already experienced how it is, you've already experienced the privilege of that power, would you, after a year, step down? I don't think so. And that's exactly what happened to Eteocles and Polynices. Eteocles didn't want to step down, and therefore Polynices had to rebel. And to answer that, Eteocles, being the king, banished Polynices from the kingdom of Thebes and actually accused him of treachery. Okay? And so Eteocles became the king again for another year. So what happened to Polynices? Here's what happened to him. He went to the kingdom of Argos, and he was so clever enough to have a royal marriage, meaning he married the princess of that kingdom. And after the marriage, he convinced his father-in-law, the king, to expand their power, to expand their land. And how do you do that? By conquering another kingdom. And somewhat he said, you know what, father-in-law, I know a small kingdom, the name is Thebes, and we could actually conquer that. I will help you conquer that kingdom. And so they went for a war against Thebes. The twins actually had a head-to-head battle, and lots of lives were lost just because of the want for power. And two of the lives that were taken were the lives of Eteocles and Polynices. Okay, I know what you're thinking now. Like, what? But that's what happened. So, no more king again. Because the brothers, had to fight head to head, and they killed each other. So what happened now? Yes, you're correct. Creon once again, became the king. And as the king, he considered, his decree was that Eteocles died as a king, and therefore he died as a hero. Polynices died as a traitor of the state. And therefore, Eteocles will be given a righteous burial. And burial in ancient Greek, and I think in any other culture, is a very sacred thing. It's done to give honor to the person. And therefore, Eteocles will have to be given a proper burial. And Polynices, because he was a traitor, his body will be left under the sun to rot. They wouldn't care if the crows would eat his flesh, or it dries up, or whatever, as long as it will not be given a proper burial. So everybody followed that decree, because whoever will be caught burying the body of Polynices will be sentenced to death. Now here's what happened to Creon. He was so focused on that he forgot that these two guys, Eteocles and Polynices, had two sisters, Ismene, and most especially Antigone. And Antigone, he actually underestimated, because Antigone, okay, here you see Antigone whispering something to Ismene, and what she was whispering to Antigone is that, remember that, although this is not the exact line, but it's like reminding Ismene, her older sister, that the law of God should be over and above the law of the land. And the law of the God said that you should take care of your brothers and sisters, that you should take care of your family, that you should respect all living forms, regardless if they were traitors, regardless if they were heroes. And therefore, her argument is that Polynices deserves a proper burial as Eteocles. And now you're guessing right. Antigone would attempt to bury the body of her brother Polynices. Will she be caught? Let's move on. On the first attempt, Antigone was almost caught. Here's something about Ismene. She didn't want anything to do about Antigone's plan. She said, I support you, my little sister, but I don't want to be directly involved in whatever you have to do, because I also respect the king, and that's the decree of the king. So Antigone said, okay, whatever, I'll have to do what I have to do. On the second attempt, she already dug the soil, and she already put Polynices' body in the excavation, and then she got caught. So what the soldiers did, they brought her to Creon, and they dug up again Polynices' body. Okay, so you could just imagine what they're doing to the dead body of Polynices. Now Creon is somewhat caught between his decree and his, values. Because again, he did not see that coming. He had a very good decree. That made him a good king, because he honored their hero and they punished the traitor, Polynices. But he again had forgotten about Antigone, most especially. And he did not see that coming because he thought that everybody would agree to his law. So, after consulting his advisors, he decided to sentence Antigone to death. Because he said, if I'm going to let her go, what would that make me as a king? Everybody would now question my credibility as a king. But if I stay true to my decree, to my law, that makes me a good king, and I would have everybody's respect. I would stay true to my words, and everybody would say that I'm a good leader. So he said Antigone has to die because regardless of her statute in her status in their kingdom, she did not follow the rules, the law. Now here comes Haman. Haman is Creon's son and also Antigone's fiance. That's how they do it. Royal family, they marry cousins, and basically cousins. They marry because they don't want the power to go outside of their family. So Haman at first said, okay, father, I support you. You're the king. I totally respect you. And then probably he had this change of heart because he loves Antigone. And so he went back to Creon and said, Father, you'll have to think things over. You'll have to think twice or 3 times, or as many times as you have to, because you're going to take someone else's life, and that someone else is your niece and also my fiance, and she's a member of the royal family, and she was just wanting to pay respect to her brother. But Creon stayed true to his decision. Finally, here comes the blind prophet once again, Tiresias. And he warns Creon. And he said, Creon, do what you have to do, but just a warning, taking one life might cost more. Taking one life might cost more. But Creon had really made his mind. And he said, I don't care what you said. I don't care what you say. And the advisor let him decide for his own. And so he said, no, Antigone has to suffer. Antigone has to be, has to suffer the consequences of her actions. So, on the day of her death, of her execution, Creon changes his mind. And he said, okay, everyone, soldiers, you have to go to Antigone's dungeon and let her free. Tell her that she is free to go. She's no longer going to die. So when the soldiers marched towards the dungeon and they told Antigone of the king's decision, Antigone, on the other hand, said, no. If I'll have to be free, but my brother's body remains unburied, then I'd prefer to be killed. So the soldiers went back to Creon again and told Creon, this is what Antigone wants. And after several times, he said, okay, you have to bury the body of Polynices first, and then you go to Antigone and let her know that she's free. Now Haman, on the other hand, wasn't aware of this, of his father's recent decision. So what he did when he heard that the soldiers are about to go to Antigone's dungeon, he went rushing in to save Antigone. Unfortunately, when he went there, he saw Antigone had already committed suicide because she was thinking that Creon would not fulfill her want of burying her brother. So upon seeing that Antigone had killed herself, Haemon drew his sword and also killed himself. When the soldiers arrived, the soldiers were about to tell Antigone that they've already buried the body of Polynices and she's free to go, found 2 dead bodies in the dungeon. So they went back to Creon again and told him the bad news. Eurydice, the mother of Haemon, heard of what happened to her son, and therefore she also took her own life. And again, the warning of Tiresias came true. Deciding to take one life will cost more lives. And that's what happened to Creon. So, you might be asking, what happened to Creon? Don't worry, he did not commit suicide. He remains alive, and he accepted his fault, he accepted his flaws, he accepted his, poor decision making, and he moved on with his life. He had a kingdom to rule, and he could not, go to one corner and cry his heart out until he dies. He decided to move on with his life. So that's the end of the Theban Trilogy. It's a very complicated thing, because a drama, according to Aristotle, should also be complicated. Remember, the difference between a short story and a novel is the complexity of the conflict. If it is simple, that's good for a short story. But if it's a novel, it should be complicated. The same with the conflict in drama. I had to change my location. So what is tragedy? According to Aristotle, tragedy is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete, and of a certain magnitude, in language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament, the several kinds being found in separate parts of the play in the form of action, not of narrative, which incidents arousing pity and fear wherewith to accomplish its catharsis of such emotions. So there are some important points that you just have to remember in this definition of tragedy according to Aristotle. First of all, that it is an imitation of an action. It is not, so it's more of sequence of events. It's focused on the sequence of events. What happened first, what happened next, and so on and so forth. Second, that it is complete, meaning it has beginning, middle, and end. Third, it has magnitude. It lasts for, if it's going to be acted out, it lasts for about 2 hours. The reason for that is so that the solution to the conflict will have to be explained well, will have to be understood well by the audience, so that they will, so that they will understand how the conflict of the drama was solved. Because if it's very, very short, then it's as if, parang minadali yung kwento. So it has to have a certain magnitude. And this should be shown in the form of action, because the completed form of drama is a play. Because a drama should not only be read, it has to be acted out. Because from the Greek word dran, meaning to do or to act out. Therefore, this is a special kind of literature because it doesn't have narration. Unlike other fiction, and unlike prose fiction, this doesn't have narrators that would explain why the actors did this and did that, and why they think that way. Everything should be explained in action, and everything should be explained in dialogues. It has to arouse pity and fear. The audience will have to feel pity and fear towards the character. Meaning, it should be good enough that the audience will have to really be affected of whatever is happening in the story or to the character. And of course, at the very end, there should be a catharsis. In class, probably on our second meeting, we've already explained what a catharsis is. It's like purgation and release of pent-up emotion. At the end of a drama, there should be release of that pent-up emotion. And what is that pent-up emotion? It's actually the pity and fear that they feel. So, all throughout the story, pity and fear should be the feeling that the audience should have. The very end, they should be able to let go of that pity and fear towards your character. Okay, so just like what I said, etymologically speaking, this comes from a Greek word, dran, which means to do. So the ultimate form of a drama is a play. It should be acted out. It begins in the 5th century. It's a practice. It's an annual festival of the Greek people to give honor to the god of wine and fertility, Dionysus. Prominent figures, you have Aeschylus, Sophocles, the playwright of Theban Trilogy, Euripides, and Aristophanes when it comes to tragicomedy. The first three are known, very prominent tragedians. That's what they call them. They are playwrights, but they specialize on tragedies. The most important element of drama, because of its definition that it is an imitation of an action, no doubt about it, the most important element is its plot, followed by the character, the thought, diction, melody, and spectacle. These are the 6 elements of tragedy according to their importance. According to Aristotle. So, why do we have spectacle as the very least? Because it is the least connected to literature. It is more concerned on the production design, on the lighting, on the blocking, props, and all of those things. Okay? You have here the plot as the most important thing. The plot must be whole, okay? Beginning, middle, and end. Has 3 parts, that's it. It should be complete. It is self-contained and it is unified. Self-contained meaning that the solution to the conflict is actually within the story. There's no like magical thing or magical figure that suddenly appears towards the end of the drama and then solves everybody's problem. And it has magnitude. I've already explained this to you. Enough length to exploit all events that lead to the solution of the conflict. So that's the plot. The tragic hero, the next one is the character. We have 4 basic qualities of a tragic hero. First of all, they must be eminently good. There's no tragic hero that is evil, naturally evil. They have to be good. Of noble stature. There's no wonder why Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Theban Trilogy all talk about stories of prince, princess, king, queens, because usually they have to be of noble stature. Has propriety. They act the way that they are expected to act, and they also have to be realistic. Therefore, they're not flawless. They have some sort of a glitch. Although they are rich, they're beautiful, they're famous, they're noble, there has to be something that is slightly wrong with them that makes them realistic characters. Aside from these 4 basic qualities, you also have this 6 necessary characteristics of a tragic hero. First, there has to be hamartia. Later on, I will explain what this is. Their hamartia is in the form of hubris. They have to have anagnorisis, recognition, and peripeteia, mimesis, and catastrophe. All of this will lead to their catharsis. Now, what is this hamartia that we're talking about? Hamartia, let us just go back there. Hamartia is their tragic flaw. Remember that they have to be realistic. They have to have a flaw. I'd like to call it a glitch. A slight stupidity in them. Just like what we tell people, usually intelligent people, they're stupid when it comes to love. That's their glitch. That's their hamartia. So, tragic heroes also have hamartia. Their hamartia should be in the form of hubris. When we say hubris, it's excessive pride. That's the common hamartia of tragic heroes. Although they're good, they're eminently good, they're respectful, they love their family and all of those things, but they have to have this excessive pride, because that excessive pride would lead to their fate, hence the tragedy. Anagnorisis is when the character realizes his actions, the consequences of his actions. But usually this comes a little later in the story. And peripeteia is like a reversal of action. This is what we call tragic irony. Tragic irony, peripeteia, is when the character decides on something and deliberately or not deliberately thinking about the other consequences of his decision. Meaning, when he made his decision, he had a good consequence in his mind. But then later on, instead of that happening, the bad one actually happens. Just like this. You are the one who encouraged your friend to learn how to drive because he bought his new car, and so you really pushed him to learn how to drive. So he enrolled at driving school, he learned to drive, and then he died of car crash. If it was not because of you pushing him, probably you're thinking that he should be still alive right now. So that's similar to a tragic irony. You made your decision because you have this good result in mind, but instead of that happening, it resulted to something bad. That's peripeteia. Mimesis is what we call your inevitable fate, meaning no matter what you do, your fate will still come true. It will be fulfilled. Just like the prophecy of Tiresias for King Laius and Queen Jocasta, that no matter what they did, the prophecy actually fulfilled itself. Catastrophe, of course, is the downfall of the character. That makes it tragic. But all in all, at the end of it all, there has to be catharsis, or all of these things will have to be let go for the character to actually move forward in his life. Now, if we apply this to Antigone, here's what it's going to be. This is like the stage. This is like the theater. And you have the tragic hero on the one side and the audience on the other. And they are divided by a boundary called the stage. That no matter, even though the audience are on that side, they cannot actually cross that boundary and help directly the character. They could only just witness how this character's fate unfolds, and all they can feel is just pity and fear towards that character. So this character will have to unravel his fate in a unified plot, complete plot. Okay, there has to be a beginning, a climax, and an ending. That's what we call a unified plot. Now, within this unified plot is the character's mimesis, or his inevitable fate. That no matter what we do, his fate will have to be fulfilled. Okay? Now, this character, one of his characteristics, he has to have hamartia. That's his tragic flaw. What kind of tragic flaw? That's his hubris, his excessive pride. And this excessive pride will make him decide on something. Now, if I ask you the question, between Antigone and Creon, who do you think is the tragic character or tragic hero in Antigone? If you said Antigone, probably you were driven by the fact that that part right there is entitled after her, but it's actually Creon. Creon, who is the tragic hero, because he possesses all of these elements and characteristics. Now, since Creon, because he has his excessive pride, he's eminently good. Because he's good, he did not take advantage of his power while he was the interim king after Laius was killed by Oedipus. Because if he wasn't that good, or if he wasn't good, he would not let the hero Oedipus marry his sister and become the king. He would just say, okay, if you solve that riddle, I give you lots and lots of money. But no, he said, you be the king because you've proven yourself to be good. So he's eminently good, but he has this excessive pride. Because he was the king, his excessive pride told him, no, you have to stay true to your decree. You have to stay true to your law. That's your law, and everybody therefore should obey that law. And therefore, that made him decide. His decision of establishing that decree to not bury the body of Polynices was for the good of his state. To give pride to the heroes who died in that war, and to punish who needs to be punished. But then again, it's a tragedy. He wanted to have that consequence, but then he did not see Antigone coming and all of her schemes and all of her plans that led to his downfall. Later on, when everybody died, Eurydice, his wife, Haemon, Antigone died, and the twins died. Later on, he actually recognized that. Hey, my decision was not that good, and therefore my decision led to all of these deaths. But what's so good about the tragic hero is that even though they met their downfall, they had their catastrophe, he had to, move on with his life after that. And while all of this is happening, the people on the other end of this, the audience, felt pity and fear towards your character, because all along they knew that he is, going down towards the end of the plot, but they cannot do anything about it. All they can do is to feel pity and fear for him. Okay? And after that, both the character and the audience will experience catharsis. They will have that feeling of oh, thank God that happened. Oh, thank God Creon did not kill himself. Thank God he decided to move on with his life. Okay? So, that is how drama is. It's a very interactive kind of literary piece. Quite different from all other genres that we have discussed so far, because there's an interaction between the character and the audience, but the audience cannot do anything about the character's fate. They can just watch him commit a poor decision making process and suffer the consequences of his decision. Okay, so that's all for drama, tragedy, according to Aristotle. And when we meet on Tuesday, we're going to review this a little bit, and I would be hoping, praying that you have read 6 Characters in Search of an Author. So I'll see you all on Tuesday. Good luck and happy weekend to everyone. Bye-bye.